Okay, picture this. You've got a mission, maybe a project, could be a whole organization you're trying to build or, grow. And you hit that universal bottleneck.
Uh-huh.
You just need more people, more hands on deck,
Yeah.
right? More skilled individuals, more leaders who can actually step up and make things happen.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're constantly trying to do it all yourself, or you're leaning way too hard on just a tiny group of superstars.
That feeling, that potential bottleneck,
Yeah.
because you just don't have enough capable people.
Yeah.
It's incredibly common, isn't it?
Totally.
A big vision often, well, it outstrips the current capacity to actually pull it off.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the core challenge this deep dive is all about. We've been looking into this really fascinating source. It's titled Developing Servants, Leaders, and Planters. And it tackles this head on, especially, in the context of church planting.
Right. And what's powerful about this source material, I think, is it doesn't just complain about the problem. It actually gives you a whole framework, a perspective on how to really find and then develop and then mobilize the people from within your existing group.
Right. So our mission here today is to unpack its key principles, look at the practical approaches it suggests. Think of this as exploring a blueprint for building capacity, not by constantly trying to recruit outsiders, but by, raising up the people you already have. Now, the source is specifically focused on ministry and church planting. But stick with us here because the insights it offers into identifying, training, empowering people, they feel incredibly relevant for, honestly, any team, any organization, any endeavor that needs to grow its human capability.
So the source kicks off by calling out this core challenge: the harvest needs workers. It describes a feeling I think a lot of leaders will recognize instantly.
Yeah.
You look around and you feel like, there just aren't enough workers, or maybe new team members seem kind of slow to get going.
Right, to get up to speed.
Or you get that feeling that people just aren't very, gifted in the specific ways you need right now.
Yeah, that sort of resignation can be a killer, can't it?
Right.
Just assuming you drew the short straw on people.
Exactly. And the source makes this really powerful historical connection. It points out this isn't some new problem unique to us today. It goes right back to Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah, references Matthew chapter 9. Jesus is traveling around teaching, healing, and he sees these huge crowds. And his reaction, it's profound compassion.
Why? What did he see?
Because, the text says, they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. Just this huge need, a clear problem of people needing guidance, needing care.
And here's where the insight hits, right? According to how the source reads it, Jesus' analysis of that situation wasn't, okay, I need to work harder, do more miracles myself.
No.
His diagnosis of the core issue was a lack of laborers. The opportunity, the harvest, was massive, but the people actually available to do the work, few.
Precisely. And the source argues that Jesus' starting point for tackling this shortage wasn't like immediately launching some new training program. It began with prayer. Ask the Lord of the harvest, he said, to send out workers. So for any leader facing this feeling of, I just don't have enough people, the source insists that this prayerful recognition of dependence, asking for help, is the fundamental first step before any strategy, before any method.
Okay, so starting with seeking divine help for the labor force. But then once you've asked, the human part kicks in. Develop it. And the source highlights this critical shifting focus from launching to equipping.
Yeah, it notes that leaders, especially in a startup phase, like, say, church planters launching a new congregation, they're often really good evangelists, very entrepreneurial types.
Right. They are the engine. They model everything at the start.
The motor and model, as the source puts it.
Yeah.
They're driving it, showing everyone the way.
Yeah.
But, and this is crucial, the source makes it really clear that the gifts and the focus needed to launch something are fundamentally different from what's needed to strengthen and multiply it down the road. As the group grows, the leader's emphasis absolutely must shift. The focus has to move towards equipping the people around them, the local believers, the team members already there.
And this shift isn't just presented as, like, a good idea practically. It's framed with a biblical mandate, isn't it? Pointing to Ephesians 4.
That's right. Where leaders are given to equip. That's the purpose, God's people.
Yeah.
Not some special elite group, but the everyday believers.
For service.
For service, exactly. And here's a really crucial insight from the source. Equipping is way more than just teaching Bible truth or, job-specific skills.
Okay.
It has to include helping people discover their natural gifts, their spiritual gifts, developing those gifts through actual service, and critically addressing what they call the affective domain, their character, their core convictions, their values, the heart stuff.
Ah, the internal landscape. So the heart matters just as much as the head and the hands.
Absolutely.
That connects to this really striking quote they included. Effective ministry emerges out of the quality of character, not out of technical competence.
Powerful.
Until the Lord has shaped the vessel, it will not serve his purpose.
Wow.
Yeah.
That completely reframes what effective training even looks like.
It really does. It's basically saying you can give someone all the technical skills in the world, but if their character isn't aligned, isn't shaped,
Yeah.
they won't be truly effective in the long run. And tied right into this is the core principle of empowering every believer.
Every single one.
Every single one. The source emphasizes that everyone is gifted by God. It points to Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, 1 Peter 4, and therefore everyone is capable of serving in some way.
So it's not about desperately finding those few gifted superstars.
No.
But about helping everyone recognize the gifts they already possess and then helping them actually use them.
Precisely. This whole spirit of empowerment, getting every person developing and using their gifts, is presented as absolutely key. Key to the group's growth, key to the individual's maturity, and ultimately key to the ability of the whole thing to reproduce itself.
And it means the leader's role fundamentally changes. They have to transition from being that motor and model, the one driving everything, to becoming the mobilizer and mentor, the one helping other people step up and drive.
I see, a mobilizer and mentor. And it pushes back pretty hard against the idea that only, the paid professionals can do the really key work, doesn't it?
It does. For multiplication, for things to happen faster and more organically, the source argues you absolutely have to empower everyone, the lay leaders, the volunteers, in all aspects of the ministry.
Okay. That whole framework for thinking about different levels of involvement leads us nicely into what the source introduces, drawing on John Maxwell's work, I think.
Yep, levels of mobilization.
Right. It lays them out in a table in the source. Level 1 is nurturing.
Okay, so this level, it's focused squarely on meeting people's basic needs. It's all about caring for people. The style is very relational, very service-oriented. The outcome, it tends towards maintenance. It's essential, obviously, but it doesn't typically lead to growth on its own. And importantly, this level involves all participants. Everyone gets nurtured.
Okay, foundational care for everyone. Makes sense. Then level 2 is equipping.
Right. Here, the focus shifts. It moves toward the task. It's about training people for specific work, helping them develop particular gifts or skills needed for that work.
So more practical.
More practical. The style is a bit more transactional, maybe focused on management of those tasks. This level adds leadership capacity in specific areas, and it brings short-term growth. This level involves many people, but not everyone.
Okay, training many people for specific jobs to get things done. Got it. And level 3, developing.
This is the highest level, and the focus here shifts again, this time to the person. This is about training for deep personal growth, for character formation, and for leadership capacity itself. The style is described as transformational, focused on leadership development, and the outcome. This is what multiplies leadership and results in that long-term, potentially exponential growth. This level, by its nature, involves just a few people.
Wow. So you move from caring for everyone, baseline, to training many for specific tasks, to deeply investing in the character and the leadership potential of just a select few who will become future leaders and, crucially, multipliers themselves.
Exactly. And the source points out that while some leaders might naturally gravitate towards level 1, the nurturing piece.
Yeah, the pastoral side.
Right. Those aiming for multiplication, for real movement, need to intentionally focus time and energy on level 2, equipping, and especially level 3, developing. Why? To empower others to handle the nurturing and, critically, to raise up the next generation of leaders who can carry it forward.
That makes perfect sense. You can't personally nurture everyone, equip everyone for every single task, and lead the whole vision forever.
Impossible.
You have to develop people who can do those things alongside you and eventually after you. Which leads us to this idea of, a journey. Leaders don't just appear fully formed, do they?
No, definitely not. The source uses this beautiful analogy, actually, comparing growth to a solid oak tree.
I like that.
It emphasizes that it takes time, it takes patience. The process, they argue, starts simply. It starts with developing faithful disciples.
Just starting with following up new believers, right? The Great Commission itself isn't just about getting people to raise their hand. It's about making disciples by teaching them to obey.
Yes, obey.
Everything Jesus commanded. Obedience, not just knowledge.
And that's a key insight the source pulls out, citing a writer named Minatreya. Missional churches, effective churches, teach for obedience, not merely for knowledge accumulation.
Wow.
It is not what they know, the quote goes, but what they live that counts. That foundational focus on lived-out faith, on obedience, is presented as absolutely critical.
That's a powerful reframing. It's not about acing a theology quiz. It's about fundamentally changing how you live your life.
Exactly.
And built right on that foundation of discipleship of obedience is stage 2, servants.
Yeah, learning to serve is just fundamental discipleship. The source really emphasizes that you learn to serve by, well, serving, by doing simple things, meeting needs wherever they appear in the community. That's how a true servant heart develops. And importantly, connecting back to equipping. Equipping is most effective when the skills being taught are applied almost immediately to serving real needs within the group. Personal development, that deep character shaping, happens in service. Like 1 Corinthians 12 suggests, gifts are given for the common good, for service.
So that integration of learning and doing is critical. It's not learn then go serve. It's learn while you are serving.
Precisely. The source even includes a caution from Patterson, I think, warning against educational goals that only aim to educate a man in isolation.
Right.
Versus biblical objectives that always seek to edify the church, to build up the whole community through that service. And then there's that really memorable conviction from the source, echoing Oswald Sanders.
What's that?
Train a servant and you will get a leader.
Train a servant and you will get a leader.
Wow. That really flips the script on just running endless leadership seminars, doesn't it? It really does. Service is presented as the primary pathway where potential leaders are identified. Why? Because serving in actual tasks reveals character, it reveals gifting under pressure, and it develops humility.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone who serves faithfully will become a formal leader, and that's okay. But serving is the essential proving ground, the place you look first.
Which naturally brings us to stage 3, leaders.
Right. Leaders emerge over time as you intentionally start to focus on developing those specific individuals who have shown potential through their faithful service.
And how does the source distinguish a leader here?
Well, it notes that while leaders are always servants first, the distinction is that a leader actively leads. They provide guidance, they help others find their potential and step into service. They're more than just reliable helpers. They become multipliers of capacity.
So it's that ability to empower and guide others that really marks out a leader in this framework.
That seems to be the key differentiator.
And for the multiplication of the overall mission to happen, you have to multiply not just disciples, not just workers, but specifically leaders.
Exactly. And again, the source points back to Jesus' own pattern, noting how his focus increasingly narrowed towards the end of his ministry, spending focused, intensive time with the 12 disciples.
Yeah.
That intentional investment in the future leaders was paramount.
Okay, so how do you even identify who has that potential? Who do you pour that intensive level 3 development into? Where does the source say to start?
Well, perhaps unsurprisingly by now, it starts with that foundational first step again.
Let me guess. Prayer.
Prayer, absolutely. They cite Jesus praying all night before calling the 12 apostles, and Paul and Barnabas appointing elders only after prayer and fasting. Selection starts with seeking guidance.
Okay, and beyond prayer.
Beyond prayer, the source looks at qualifications, referencing those character qualities listed in places like 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1.
Yeah.
Things like integrity, self-control, gentleness.
The standard lists?
The standard lists, yeah. While also acknowledging the real-world challenge of aligning those, biblical ideals with varying local cultural expectations of leadership.
That's a tricky balance.
It is. But then it drills down to 2 absolutely essential factors for identifying potential leaders: faithfulness and giftedness.
Faithfulness and giftedness. Okay, tell me about faithfulness first.
Faithfulness is highlighted first, and it's presented as basically non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Paul tells Timothy, remember, to entrust the teachings to reliable men or people who will be able to teach others also. That's 2 Timothy 2.2. Faithfulness, the source argues, is proven in the small things, carrying out small tasks consistently, responsibly, without needing constant oversight. Success in those small things is the pathway to being entrusted with larger responsibilities.
Like in the parable of the talents, right? You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Matthew 25.
Yes, exactly that principle. It's a universal truth.
Okay, so faithfulness is foundational. What about giftedness?
Giftedness is the second key factor. The source points out, quite practically, that you need to equip people according to their natural abilities or spiritual gifts. If you try to force someone into a role they aren't gifted for.
Yeah, frustration all around.
Exactly. Frustration for them, frustration for the team. Someone can be incredibly faithful, deeply committed, but simply not gifted for, say, public teaching or strategic leadership. And that's okay. They serve faithfully where they are gifted.
So the combination is the key then. You're looking for demonstrated faithfulness in service, plus an appropriate giftedness for the specific leadership task you're considering them for. All built on a foundation of general spiritual maturity. That's the sweet spot for that intensive level 3 investment.
That's exactly right. That's the profile you're looking for. Now, thinking about how you actually do this equipping, for both workers and leaders, the source uses a great analogy here.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
The handyman who only owns hammers.
Huh. Yes, I love this image because it's so instantly relatable. If your handyman shows up for a complex job and all they have in their truck is hammers, maybe different sizes, sure, but still just hammers,
You'd be a little worried.
you'd be worried. They can only solve problems that require hammering. That's their entire toolbox.
And the point the source makes is that many organizations, churches included, can be like that handyman. They might have only one or two primary equipping methods they rely on.
Like maybe just classroom teaching, or maybe only one-on-one discipleship.
Exactly. And the source argues really strongly that you need a wide array of tools. You need a full toolbox of equipping methods, not just one or two tricks.
Because you need different methods for different stages of development, right? And different roles, different people learn differently.
Precisely. It's not a one-size-fits-all assembly line approach to developing people.
Okay.
So, for example, when equipping new believers, the source suggests the method is primarily informal. It happens in the messy, everyday stuff of life. Mature believers just walking alongside newer ones, sharing their stories, setting examples, answering questions as they come up. Bible study is important context, sure, but the primary learning happens in that lived relational experience.
Life-on-life learning. Okay. Then for, say, volunteer workers, someone leading a small group or serving on a ministry team, they need more specific equipping for practical skills, right?
Yes, definitely. Workshops or seminars can be a really useful starting point to introduce those basic skills, but the core approach, the source insists, must be mostly hands-on.
Learning by doing.
Learning by doing the actual work with support. Coaching becomes really necessary for those who are apprenticing in a specific role. And then ongoing skill development often happens naturally right there in the regular team meetings, discussing challenges, sharing best practices.
Developing skills right in the context of the work itself. Makes sense. And then for primary leaders, people leading larger ministries or maybe future planting teams, that requires an even deeper level of formation, doesn't it?
Yes, much deeper. They need more profound character formation, a greater grasp of biblical understanding, and generally higher standards of maturity because they'll be navigating more complex challenges.
Right.
Learning theology, biblical interpretation, church history. This kind of study expands their capacity for discernment and wise leadership. And while informal methods like mentoring continue, this is where formal or non-formal training becomes increasingly necessary.
Like Bible schools, seminaries, or maybe alternative church-based programs.
Exactly. And particularly for multiplying lay leaders or bivocational planters, those who aren't full-time paid staff, the source strongly advocates for a decentralized training approach. Meaning training happens right in their context. Maybe they gather periodically, maybe online components, but it's punctuated by practical experience back home. It avoids pulling them away from their ministry and life for years at a time.
Oh, okay.
This keeps them rooted where they are, makes the learning immediately applicable, and helps avoid creating leaders who feel detached or overly professionalized, unable to relate to the people they're leading.
That makes a lot of sense.
But the source is also very clear. Foundational biblical and theological grounding is not optional, even in fast-growing movements. You need that anchor to prevent instability or drifting into false teaching.
Got it. And then right at the highest level, equipping those potential movement leaders, what does that look like?
That requires developing visionary capacity, strategic thinking, providing space for deep reflection, and giving freedom to experiment and learn from failure. Mentoring, after that solid theological foundation is laid, is absolutely key for them.
Okay. So, seeing this need for a whole toolbox of different methods, the source highlights some specific models that go beyond just the traditional formal classroom approach. It outlines 3 key ones. I think they were in a table.
Yeah, table 17.3 in the source material.
Let's dive into those a bit. First up, workshops.
Okay, workshops. These are typically group-based, non-formal, usually with a pretty clear structure. The key feature, like the name says, is that participants actually work. They're active, not just passively listening. The purpose is usually to introduce initial skills or knowledge needed for specific tasks. Good for getting new workers started. The model is basically know, then, do. Learn the concept, then practice it.
Advantages, disadvantages.
Advantages are they're pretty good for teaching specific, definable skills efficiently. You can often bring in outside experts to lead them, and they're repeatable. Limitations. Well, the learning might not transfer easily to complex, real-world situations, and there's generally minimal focus on character formation in a typical workshop.
Okay, good for practical skill acquisition, maybe less for deep formation. Next, equipping in ministry teams.
Right. This happens organically right within the regular meetings of an existing ministry team. It's informal or non-formal. The purpose here is ongoing skill development and making the team itself more effective.
So it's for people already doing the work.
Exactly. People already serving in that team. The content is very process-oriented, dealing with real-time cases, current issues, problems the team is actually facing. It's more of a do then know we then do better cycle.
Learning from experience.
Learning from experience, reflecting on it together. Advantages. The application is direct and immediate. It's highly relevant. Motivation is usually high. It requires minimal extra time outside the ministry itself. It's ongoing, and you get that benefit of group learning and problem solving.
Sounds great. Limitations.
Limitations.
Yeah.
It can be difficult to bring in outside resources or experts easily into that setting. There's often limited time for really deep dives into topics during a team meeting, and participation might be irregular if team attendance is spotty.
Okay. Learning embedded right in the actual work. Very efficient, though. And finally, the third model. Individual instruction, things like modeling, coaching, or mentoring.
Yeah, this is the highly intentional, usually one-on-one approach. It's typically informal, often with a minimal rigid structure. The core purpose here is deep character formation or highly specific skill development tailored precisely to the individual.
And this isn't for everyone.
No, the source stresses this is reserved for the few. Those individuals carefully selected based on that demonstrated potential and faithfulness we talked about. These are often your future leaders. The methods are personalized guidance, deep counsel, focused discipleship. Advantages. This has the maximum potential for character shaping. It's highly effective for multiplying leaders when done well, and it's deeply relational.
Downsides.
Limitations. It requires a significant time commitment from the instructor or mentor. Is really only feasible with a small number of people at a time. Its success depends heavily on the instructor's own gifts and maturity, and it can sometimes be less systematic than other methods if not structured well.
Right, and the source briefly distinguishes between those terms, doesn't it? Modeling, coaching, mentoring.
It does. Modeling is more basic, showing someone how to do something simple. The classic, I do, you watch, I do, you help, you do, I help, you do, I watch.
Cycle. Okay.
Coaching is usually more task-oriented, focused on improving performance in a specific, often more complex area.
Yeah.
Think sports coach. And mentoring is presented as the broadest, most encompassing relationship. It's ongoing, focusing on comprehensive development skills, knowledge, and that crucial element of character. They specifically highlight something called the interactive mentor model as being particularly effective.
Okay. This whole idea of learning by doing, supported by others, brings us back to a principle the source really emphasizes strongly, the importance of in-service training.
Yes, this is absolutely central to their whole philosophy of development. In-service training just means that learning happens through and during actual practice, with immediate application of whatever's being learned.
Right.
The core principle they quote is really telling. It's not what the teacher does that provides the learning, rather it is what the learner does. Learning happens when the learner is actively engaged, wrestling with the material, trying to apply it.
It's active learning, not just passive absorption. And the source lists several valuable aspects of this kind of approach, drawing from some educational researchers, Ward and Rowan.
That's right. Things like the importance of connecting new information to what you already know makes it stick better.
Okay.
Using new information very soon after you acquire it, otherwise it just fades.
Yeah. Use it or lose it.
Exactly. The fact that you learn best when the information feels personally important and relevant to your goals If you don't see the point, you won't retain it.
Makes sense.
And that your retention and accuracy shoot way up when you get prompt, specific feedback on how you're actually applying things. Did it work? What went wrong?
So it's learning in the flow of the work, supported by timely guidance and feedback.
Precisely. And a critical advantage, the source points out, is that in-service training lets trainers or mentors see their apprentices in action, in real situations.
You can spot problems.
You can spot problems early. And crucially, the source argues that leaders often fail not because they lack knowledge or skills, but because of underlying relational and character issues. Things rooted in attitudes, values, blind spots.
Issues that a purely classroom setting might never reveal, right? You can put on a good phillis in class.
Exactly. Those deeper character issues tend to surface when someone is under pressure, dealing with conflict, facing real-world challenges. In-service training provides the natural context to identify those issues and then address them directly, relationally, as part of the mentoring process.
Wow, that's huge. Okay, now zooming out a bit. If the ultimate goal we're talking about is multiplication, like a church planting movement, you don't just need well-trained workers and leaders in existing churches. You need trained and reproducing planters themselves. The source specifically addresses developing the next generation of church planters.
And their key principle for recruitment here is absolutely essential. Recruit from the harvest for the harvest.
Meaning,
recruit your future planters from within the very churches being planted, for the people who have come to faith and are growing up spiritually within that new community, within the movement itself.
raise up your leaders from within the community you're trying to reach and build. Don't just import them.
Ideally, yes. And the training itself must be designed to be reproducible, so that these newly trained planters can then turn around and train others in turn. Has to be something they can pass on.
Okay.
The source points to the example of the Antioch church back in Acts 13, sending out Paul and Barnabas. That was a relatively young church, sending out its best leaders. It highlights that willingness to release your best for the sake of wider multiplication.
Even when it hurts, probably.
Even when it hurts. And it notes that rapidly growing movements today often don't wait for experts from outside. They actively develop homegrown workers, leaders, and planters right there in the local churches.
Okay.
The source briefly mentions models for this, like that MALOL approach for very grassroots contexts and more structured church-based programs for larger churches. But the common thread is intentionality. Deliberately identifying and developing future planters is key in both settings.
Speaking of intentionality, the source gives quite a bit of attention to selecting potential planters. It sounds like this isn't something you just leave to chance or enthusiasm.
Definitely not. The source notes there's growing recognition across the board that just volunteering or showing a lot of enthusiasm isn't enough qualification for the demanding task of church planting.
Yeah, it takes a certain kind of person.
It really does. So assessment becomes crucial for discerning genuine readiness, the right kind of giftedness, and the character needed for that specific task.
And does it make a difference? Does assessment actually work?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
The source cites studies that show planters who have gone through some kind of assessment process have a significantly higher likelihood of long-term success.
Interesting.
And they're more likely to plant larger, more sustainable churches. So thinking carefully about selection isn't seen as a barrier. It's actually viewed as good stewardship of resources, of people's lives, and of the mission itself.
Okay. How do they do this assessment? What methods does it mention?
It mentions a range from quite formal, intense, multi-day assessment centers to using things like recommendations from trusted leaders, psychological tests or inventories, and structured behavioral interviews asking people how they've handled specific situations in the past.
Okay. And what are they looking for?
The source mentions a researcher named Charles Ridley, whose list of 13 behavioral characteristics has become a widely used standard. It includes things like having vision, being self-motivated, strong relationship skills, flexibility, resilience when things get tough.
Things you'd expect are needed for starting something new from scratch.
Exactly. And even though those characteristics were initially identified in a Western context, the source suggests they describe functions like casting vision, building teams, handling setbacks that seem broadly necessary for the complex task of pioneering almost anywhere.
Are there other factors besides those 13?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It also notes other important factors like clear spiritual maturity, relevant life experience, education level, and critically, how well someone fits the specific community they're aiming for and the denomination or network they're part of.
Fit matters.
Fit matters. And studies looking at non-Western contexts confirm the importance of similar functional characteristics, maybe emphasizing things like adaptability, cross-cultural sensitivity, and really strong relationship-building skills even more. The bottom line conclusion: wise, thoughtful selection is foundational to effectiveness. It helps match the person to the task.
Okay, so once you've carefully identified those potential planters, how do you actually train them? The source explores various approaches to planter training, noting it often needs to go beyond just traditional seminary.
Right. While formal seminaries are valuable, the source observes that many tend to focus more on preparing pastors for established churches, more nurturing and shepherding roles.
Okay.
So it emphasizes the need to either supplement formal education or utilize non-formal programs specifically designed to equip for missional leadership and the unique challenges of planting. Things like short-term, intensive, practical boot camps are one example.
Boot camps. Okay. Then there's that grassroots approach we touched on, often called MELL.
MELL, yeah. Model, assist, watch, leave. This is described as a very simple, highly reproducible approach, often used in house church movements or less formal settings.
How does it work again?
The experienced planter models the basic practices, sharing the gospel, gathering new believers, simple church formation. Then they assist the local believers as they start doing it. Then they step back and watch them do it on their own, offering feedback. And finally, they leave that group to reproduce independently while they go start the cycle elsewhere.
Wow. Hands off pretty quickly.
Very hands-off, designed for rapid multiplication. Success is often defined as when the third-generation church gets planted without any outside assistance. The training focus is super basic: core Bible stories, essential pastoral care, and crucially, evangelism and disciple-making.
Okay, very lean. What's another approach? Modular training.
Modular training. This typically involves gathering teams of planters from a specific region together on a regular basis, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, for focused training sessions and mutual encouragement.
Ah, like ongoing workshops.
Kind of. But a key element here is that coaches often work with the teams between the formal sessions, back in their ministry contexts, helping them actually implement what they learned in the module.
Ah, the coaching connection.
Exactly. The advantages are clear. It's in-service training. People don't have to relocate. Motivation is usually high because the content is directly relevant to their current challenges, and implementation can be immediate. The source mentions programs like the New Church Incubator or initiatives within denominations like the Vineyard using this model.
Keeping people rooted in their context seems like a really powerful theme across these non-formal models. Then you have the more structured church-based residencies or internships.
Right. These are often pioneered by larger, well-resourced churches. They're typically hands-on, immersive programs, often lasting a year or more.
What happens in a residency?
Residents usually follow a tailored learning plan. They get opportunities in a relatively safe environment to test and hone their ministry skills in real situations. And the programs often include specific components focused on character development and practical skills like fundraising. Coaching is almost always a major component.
Okay. The source highlights an example, right? Hill Country Bible Church.
Yeah, in Austin, Texas. Theirs is presented as a strong example of a rigorous year-long residency. Participants don't just get classroom training. They're actively recruiting a core team for their future plant during the residency. They're developing a strategic plan, learning fundraising firsthand, and crucially, they're held accountable for building relationships with non-believers in their target community.
Wow, that sounds comprehensive and probably quite demanding.
Very comprehensive. These are often excellent systems, but they can require significant investment, both from the sending or hosting church and from the resident themselves.
Makes sense. And finally, you mentioned non-formal regional training. How is that different from modular?
It's similar in being non-residential, but often designed for even broader accessibility. Maybe for leaders who can't meet the academic requirements for formal study or can't commit to frequent gatherings. The source points to the Hindustan Bible Institute's MTI program in India as an exemplary model here.
What's special about that one?
It's a 2-year, very practical, in-context, experiential program. A key feature is that trainees are immediately empowered and expected to teach others what they are learning. Reproduction is built right into the training process itself.
That immediate reproduction again. Very powerful.
Very. And the source notes several factors contributing to the success of models like this: their accessibility, the hands-on practical approach, the integrated evaluation and mentoring, and that strong focus on empowering trainees to become trainers themselves, not just recipients of information.
Okay.
It mentions that variations of this kind of regional, non-formal approach are seen elsewhere too, like in Myanmar and Southeast Asia, sometimes integrating vocational skills training alongside the biblical teaching to meet tangible needs in the community.
So a whole range of intentional approaches for developing planters, really tailored to different contexts and resources. But the development journey, it doesn't just end when they launch their new thing, does it?
Yeah, absolutely not.
The source strongly emphasizes the need for ongoing support, coaching, and encouraging planters.
Yeah, this is presented not as a nice add-on, but as truly essential. As planters launch, they inevitably face unanticipated challenges, deep discouragement, complex problems they couldn't possibly have planned for.
I can only imagine.
So ongoing support, coaching, mentoring, whatever you call it, is crucial. Crucial for helping them apply what they learned in training to new situations, for troubleshooting unexpected issues, for gaining fresh perspective when they're stuck, and critically, for their own personal development and resilience in the face of hardship.
Yeah, just dealing with the potential isolation, facing their own limitations, learning how to celebrate the small wins, processing the setbacks. It's the support needed to navigate the intense reality of pioneering something new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the source points out that coaching and mentoring are widely recognized now as vital forms of professional development across many fields, not just in ministry.
True.
And while the empirical evidence on its direct impact on the speed of church growth might be mixed,
Okay.
the source confirms that coaching definitely contributes significantly to a planter's overall effectiveness, their well-being, and their long-term sustainability in ministry.
And the concept itself is ancient, isn't it? The source points that out. We see it in relationships like Moses and Joshua, Paul and Timothy.
Yeah, the core idea that intentional personal assistance from someone more experienced is invaluable is timeless. Modern tools, though, like the GOW model. Yeah, GOW, goals, reality, options, will. It's a common coaching framework. Or another one mentioned is the 5R approach: relate, reflect, refocus, resource, review. These just provide helpful structures for those support conversations.
Okay. And what really stood out to me here was the coach's role. The source emphasizes they are skilled at asking good questions rather than just dishing out answers.
Yes. This is a critical shift in mindset for the supporter. The goal isn't for the coach to swoop in and solve the problems for the planter.
Right, which creates dependency.
Exactly. The goal is to help the planter think through the situation more clearly, explore options, find their own solutions, and build their own confidence and problem-solving capacity over time.
So the coach helps the planter become more self-sufficient.
Precisely. And ideally, planters learn from being coached how to eventually coach others themselves, multiplying that supportive capacity within the network.
Multiplying the coaching capacity, too. That's key. The source also briefly touches on the added communication challenges you might face in cross-cultural coaching and highlights another approach: coaching clusters. Small groups of planters meeting together regularly for peer support and mutual accountability.
Yeah, that pew element can be incredibly powerful too. But whether it's one-on-one or group, the key elements for effective support remain the same: a genuine caring relationship, intentionality, regular meetings, some form of accountability, and real commitment from both sides.
And the ultimate goal.
The clear goal is to help the planter reach their full God-given potential and, crucially, become a reproducing planter who develops other leaders and planters in turn.
Wow, what a comprehensive deep dive this has really been. We started with that really common challenge of just needing more capacity, needing more people. We saw how the source traces it right back to Jesus's own observation about the harvest being plentiful, but the workers being few.
Right, the core problem definition.
Then we shifted our focus, just like the source suggests leaders need to, towards the essential role of equipping, and not just equipping with skills, but fundamentally shaping character through active service.
The character piece is so central.
Absolutely. We explored frameworks like the levels of mobilization, nurturing, equipping, developing, and that idea of a growth journey from disciple to servant to leader.
Understanding that progression is key.
And we looked at how you identify those with leadership potential, looking for that combination of proven faithfulness and appropriate giftedness.
Can't skip faithfulness.
Nope. And then we dove into that whole toolbox of equipping methods, stressing the need to move beyond just classrooms and embrace in-service, hands-on, contextually relevant approaches like workshops, team-based learning, and individual mentoring or coaching.
Using the right tool for the right job, essentially.
Exactly. And finally, we focus specifically on developing that next generation of pioneers, the church planters themselves, looking at the importance of wise selection and assessment.
Crucial first
A
step.
whole variety of training models, from the very grassroots MAOL approach to more formal residencies, and underlining that absolutely essential ongoing support through coaching and mentoring long after they've launched.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? A cohesive vision for building capacity, not by magic, but by intentionally investing in people, recognizing that true, lasting effectiveness is rooted deeply in character, it's developed primarily through service, and it's multiplied through intentional relationships and reproducible, context-appropriate training.
It really does. And it makes you think, doesn't it? If you take these core principles, this idea of prioritizing character development alongside or even before technical skill, that natural progression from just participating to serving faithfully to eventually leading others, the sheer power of learning by doing through real-world in-service development with feedback,
Yeah.
and the absolute necessity of intentional, ongoing support and development through things like coaching and mentoring. If you took those principles and applied them beyond just the church planting context,
Right.
say in developing talent on your team at work, or maybe in your local community group, or perhaps even within your own family, what could be the impact? What kind of potential, what kind of capacity could you unlock by intentionally applying these profound insights into human development and leadership in those arenas too?